They were built for applause, but some stages echo with something else, a scream buried under velvet curtains, a whisper behind the spotlight. Tonight we uncover 3 real stories where tragedy struck and the ghosts never left. Case 1. The Ghost of Olga Duncan, Lobero, Theater, California. On a quiet night in Santa Barbara, California, the elegant Lobero Theater stands bathed in soft amber light. It's a historic place built in 1873, remodeled in 1924, and remains one of the oldest working theaters in the state. Its Spanish colonial facade draws both tourists and theater lovers. But some who visit the Lobero don't come for the performance. They come for something else, something chilling. Because according to local legend, a ghost walks the back corridors of the Lobero. And not just any ghost. They say it's Olga Duncan. Her story begins decades ago in 1958, far from any stage lights. Olga was a young nurse in California, quiet, kind-hearted, and deeply in love with a man named Frank Duncan. Their relationship had been a whirlwind. Frank was a practicing lawyer, handsome, respected, and seemingly devoted to Olga. But there was a problem: his mother. Elizabeth Duncan was fiercely possessive of her son. She didn't just disapprove of Olga, she despised her. Elizabeth saw her as an outsider, a distraction, even a threat. She reportedly went as far as to forge letters pretending to be Olga, attempting to sabotage the relationship. But it didn't work. Frank and Olga married in a small, modest ceremony. Shortly afterward, Olga became pregnant. This should have been a time of joy. But Elizabeth's hatred only deepened, and what came next stunned California. In November 1958, Olga Duncan vanished. Her co-workers reported her missing when she failed to show up for her shift. At first, police believed she may have left on her own, but her purse belongings and personal items were still at her home. Nothing had been taken. No signs of a struggle. Her car was untouched. Days passed. Then weeks. Frank Duncan appeared distraught in public. He gave interviews, begged for information. But his behavior raised questions. He seemed oddly detached at times. Police began looking closely at the family dynamic. That's when the spotlight turned to Elizabeth Duncan. Under pressure, Elizabeth's house of lies began to collapse. Investigators discovered she had approached 2 men, Luis Moya and Agustin Baldonado, with a horrifying proposition. She offered them money to kill Olga. She wanted her out of her son's life for good. The hitmen accepted. On a cold November night, they lured Olga out of her apartment, under false pretenses, beat her, and drove her to a remote canyon. There they strangled her and buried her body in a shallow grave. The murder was calculated, brutal, and final. Elizabeth Duncan was arrested. So were Moya and Baldonado. The trial gripped California. Elizabeth tried to claim mental instability, but the evidence was overwhelming. All 3 were convicted. Elizabeth Duncan was sentenced to death and became one of the last women executed in California in the gas chamber at San Quentin in 1962. You might think that's where the story ends. But not at the Lobero. Here's where the tale turns. In the years following Olga's death and Elizabeth's execution, strange things began to happen at the Lobero Theater. Stagehands reported doors opening and closing by themselves. Lights flickered in rooms with no electricity faults. Costumes fell from hangers. Props shifted. One crew member swore he saw a woman in a nurse's uniform standing backstage. She was there for a moment and then gone. Other witnesses reported hearing a woman softly calling out, "Frank, Frank," from the empty wings. The voice was calm, melancholic, searching. No one knew why the Lobero. Olga had no known ties to the theater in life, but theories spread. One said she had attended performances there shortly before her murder, that she loved the stage, and in death her spirit was drawn to one of the few peaceful places she once visited. Another theory was darker, that the Lobero, with its rich emotional energy and long history, acted as a conduit, a place where unrested souls could manifest. Even skeptics began to avoid the back hallways at night. One actor reportedly refused to return after feeling someone brush past him during a rehearsal, though no one else was nearby. Another said she saw a woman watching from the shadows in the balcony, dressed in 1950s attire, who vanished when the lights came up. It's never been proven. No official record links Olga Duncan to the Lobero Theater. But the stories continue, and those who work the night shift, those who know the quiet creaks of the old building swear that someone or something is still there. Not angry, not violent, but present, waiting. A life stolen, a child never born, a husband who didn't protect her, a mother-in-law who betrayed her. Some say Olga's spirit returned to the only place that still felt safe, the Lobero Theater. And if you listen closely during the final bow, when the applause fades and the lights dim, you might just hear her, calling for the life she lost. Case 2. The Palace Theater. Ghost, Los Angeles, California. In the heart of downtown Los Angeles, tucked between the glimmering facades of historic buildings on Broadway, stands a century-old relic of entertainment history, the Palace Theater. Built in 1911, it was once a crown jewel of the Orpheum vaudeville circuit, later transforming into a grand movie palace. The walls have echoed with laughter, applause, and music for over 100 years. But to those who have spent long hours beneath its chandeliers and up in its creaking rafters, the palace holds more than memories. Some say it still hosts a soul that never took her final bow. Her name was Margaret. She wasn't a star of the stage, nor a diva demanding the spotlight. Margaret was a stagehand, a quiet presence in denim overalls and worn work gloves. She worked the lights, the curtains, the rigging, often alone high above the audience on narrow catwalks. In the shadows, she made the magic happen for others to shine. The cast and crew respected her, but she was never famous, never in the playbill. Then one night in the 1920s, everything changed. During a routine evening rehearsal, a faulty pulley jammed above the stage. Margaret volunteered to climb up and fix it. Witnesses said she seemed calm, steady, she'd done it dozens of times. But something went wrong. A few say she slipped. Others insist the rigging cracked. All that's known is that Margaret fell. Her body landed with a sickening thud near the orchestra pit. She died instantly. There was no tribute, no grand gesture, no moment of silence. The show went on. Margaret's name faded from memory, or so they thought. Weeks later, strange things began to happen. The crew reported sudden cold spots backstage, even in the middle of summer. Tools vanished from locked drawers, only to appear neatly lined up in odd corners. Lights flickered without warning. The rigging ropes swayed gently when there was no draft. At first, they blamed faulty wiring or old wood. But then came the voices. Whispers, murmurs, a soft female voice humming an old vaudeville tune. At night, when the stage was dark and the theater empty, a handful of crew members claimed to hear someone walking across the catwalk, measured steps steady. Too heavy to be rats, too distinct to be the building settling. Actors began to notice things too. One leading man refused to rehearse after he saw a figure watching him from the upper balcony, a woman in work clothes, seated silently with her head tilted slightly. A soprano singer swore she felt fingers brush her shoulder in the wings just before she entered the stage. Another claimed her props were rearranged every night, always placed a little too close to the edge of the table. By the 1940s, the stories had become legend. They called her the Palace Ghost. Tour guides started mentioning her on historical walks. Paranormal investigators arrived with equipment eager to document what had become one of Los Angeles's most whispered-about hauntings. One group brought infrared cameras and captured a series of cold spots that seemed to move as if a person were pacing in the rafters. Another team caught a recording during a seance held in the orchestra pit. In the quiet playback, a faint voice could be heard. "It wasn't my fault." Over the decades, dozens of personal encounters were reported. A janitor claimed that every time he swept the main aisle, he'd return the next morning to find footprints in the dust, just one set leading from the stage to the balcony. A lighting technician fell and broke his leg after swearing someone pushed him while he was up adjusting gels. He never returned to the palace. In the 1970s, a young actress fainted during rehearsal after seeing a woman standing directly behind her in the dressing room mirror. But when others came to check, there was no one else there. She described the woman as tall, with her hair pulled back and eyes that looked past you, not at you. But perhaps the most chilling account came in 1983. A new production company was staging a revival of a classic play. One of the producers skeptical of the stories joked aloud about Margaret during a walkthrough. That night, a sandbag from the rigging fell during a sound check, missing him by inches. No one had touched the release mechanism. The show's director made it a rule afterward never disrespect the ghost. Crew members developed rituals. Before every major performance, someone would leave a flower, usually a white carnation, on a stool backstage. Sometimes they'd find it moved the next morning, or missing entirely. In the 1990s, a woman named Eliza, a veteran costume designer, began writing down every odd occurrence she experienced in a notebook she kept locked in her desk. Over 12 years, she logged 43 unexplained events, lost items, reappearing strange knocks, sudden gusts of wind in sealed rooms, and voices calling her name. Her final entry, written just before her retirement, read, "I think she knows me now, and I think she approves." Even visitors have had encounters. One tourist claimed that during a matinee screening they noticed an extra figure seated near the front row, though the seat had been empty moments earlier. When they tried to take a photo, their camera malfunctioned. Others say the woman in overalls still appears in the upper balcony, always alone, always silent. But Margaret is not believed to be malevolent. If anything, she is protective. Several crew members believe she's saved lives, small interventions, a tug on a sleeve, before a misstep, a whispered warning, before a cue. One actor described her presence as comforting, like someone watching from the wings, making sure everything runs right. Today, the Palace Theater continues to operate. It screens films, hosts concerts, and welcomes thousands of tourists a year. Its walls have been restored, its chandeliers polished, its stage modernized. But beneath the upgrades lies something older, something enduring. Above the spotlight's glow, beneath the velvet curtains, Margaret remains. And when the final applause dies and the stage grows quiet, she steps forward once more, waiting for the curtain to rise again. Case 3. The Haskell Opera House Death, Darby Line, Vermont. The Haskell Opera House stands on the border literally. Half of the building is in Darby Line, Vermont. The other half is in Stansted, Quebec. Its stage rests in the United States, but the audience seats extend into Canada. Built in 1904, the Haskell Free Library and Opera House was meant to symbolize unity, a rare monument where two nations met not in tension, but in harmony. But behind its elegant facade and noble intentions lies a chilling story, one that locals don't discuss often, one that faded from public record but never from memory. It began in the winter of 1932. The town was buried under snow, and the opera house had been closed for weeks. Performances were suspended due to lack of funding during the Depression. Only a skeleton crew remained, a caretaker, one janitor, and sometimes an electrician sent from across the border. Her name was Elise Brousseau. She was 22, recently hired to clean and maintain the dressing rooms and lobby. French-Canadian by birth, she had grown up just across the border and dreamed of one day performing on the Haskell stage. She would sweep the floor humming arias, dust the balcony while whispering lines from Molière. She was quiet, respectful, and often stayed past her hours just to linger in the backstage corridors. On February 18th, she didn't come home. Her parents, alarmed, contacted the building's caretaker. The local police were notified. By morning, her frozen body was found just inside the backstage entrance, lying in a pool of melted snow and blood. Her head had struck a marble stair. At first glance, it appeared she had slipped. A tragic accident. But there were questions. Her purse was missing. Her shoes were off. One of the stage curtains had been torn, and there were drag marks on the dusty floor leading from the prop room to the stairs. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses. The police in Vermont deferred to Canadian authorities for jurisdictional reasons. The Canadians deferred back. And so it remained unresolved. Whispers followed. Some said Elise had been meeting someone, secretly an actor who had performed there in the summer. Others believed she had interrupted a robbery. A few claimed the building itself was cursed, haunted by an older tragedy that no one wanted to talk about. In the years that followed, strange things began happening inside the Opera House. It started with footsteps. Custodians reported hearing someone walking above the stage long after hours. Always soft. Always measured, never frantic. Instruments in the storage room were found tuned, though no one had touched them. A mannequin used for costume fittings was once discovered in the center of the stage, facing the seat's arms extended as if performing. Then came the sightings. A librarian working late one winter evening claimed she saw a woman in white standing near the stage doors. The woman vanished when approached. A musician practicing for a spring recital ran out of the building after seeing a reflection that wasn't hers in the old mirror in the women's dressing room. By the 1960s, the ghost had a name, Elise. During a rehearsal for a children's play in 1971, the main spotlight exploded without warning. No one was hurt, but a child later told his mother he saw a woman with no eyes standing behind the curtain. A technician refused to ever enter the catwalks again after he heard humming overhead while he was alone. He quit the following week. Records show that in 1983, a visiting theater troupe from Montreal canceled their production after their lead actress collapsed on stage during a run-through. She claimed she felt an icy hand grip her wrist and pull her backward. There were no wires. No trapdoors. The Haskell tried to move forward. Renovations were done in the 1990s, new carpets, refinished stage, modern lighting. But the oddities never stopped. One photographer, during a historical documentation shoot in 2002, captured what looked like a human silhouette leaning in the upper balcony. When enhanced, the figure had long hair and a pale outline of a face, eyes dark. The theater was confirmed to be empty at the time. Elise became legend. Locals began to leave small bouquets on the back steps during winter. Others refused to enter the building alone after sundown. The cleaning staff changed frequently. Some lasted weeks. Others left after a single shift. In 2011, a group of paranormal researchers were granted overnight access. They set up thermal cameras, EMF detectors, and audio equipment. What they recorded remains controversial. At 2:13 a.m., a cold spot measuring 20 degrees Fahrenheit below ambient temperature appeared near the dressing room. Simultaneously, a microphone picked up faint static followed by a whisper. Slowed down and filtered the audio revealed 3 syllables, Je suis là. I am here. The footage made it into a small documentary aired on regional television. Since then, the Haskell has become a quiet pilgrimage site for paranormal enthusiasts. But out of respect for its dual-nation heritage and ongoing use, no official tours acknowledge Elise. Still ask the right local and they'll tell you, if you sit in the last row center aisle just after dusk. You might hear soft humming drifting from backstage. And if you wait long enough, you may feel a shift in the air, a momentary coldness, and the sensation that someone just stepped onto the stage. Not to perform, but to remember. Elise Brousseau never took her bow, but the curtain still moves when no one is watching. Some curtains never close. Some stories never end. If you're still here, maybe part of you heard them too. Subscribe to hear what else still whispers in the dark.